Dear Lord Almighty, or is it you, Yahweh? Allah? Oh no, is it you, Moloch? Is it Demiurge? Well, whoever the fuck is listening up in the heavens, the universe, that's right. I come to you with a big request. It's a huge one, I know, but I'm willing to do anything you want. But please, give me the downloads. How can I make man a slave to me? There is nothing in this world that I want more than a man to do my work, to be a slave to me. Please give me the knowledge. Amen. It's me, my boy. You come to me with big requests. I will drop the knowledge on your ass if you promise me this, my boy. You will share this knowledge with those who have the eyes to see it, the ears to hear it, and the brains to receive it. But remember, this knowledge comes with great price to the humanity. This knowledge will destroy man's spirit. But because you are my boy, I will drop this knowledge onto your ass right now. Go! First thing you gotta do is get the man out of the nature. In the nature, the man is free. It's a free man. Slave is not a free man, it's your man. So, get the man out of the nature. Nature very bad. In the nature, man free, has freedoms. Man is living in the moment. The work man does in the nature has meaning. Man has fame in the nature. Man goes hunt with the boys in the nature. Life is good in the nature. This is no slave life. So you need to figure out how to get the man from the nature to the matrix, to the man-made reality. That's a step one. Next up, you can use force, but the slave is always better when he or she doesn't know he or she is a slave. So if you use force, the man's gonna know he is slave. So you wanna be real clever about this. Third up, You need to make the slaves forget about the free life. You need to make the slaves forget about the nature. You need to start programming these slaves to forget about their past. You need to erase that memory. Now man has still his nature inside of him. Man has his instincts, intuition, but you really need to start using some black magic on top of that programming you've been doing, that education you've been doing for your slaves to forget about the past. You need to, on top of that, add a little bit more hypnosis type of shit, so man starts to think his own instincts, his own intuition, what the man's heart tells him to do. You need to start making man think that this is wrong. This is bad. Very bad for the man. This is damaging. And you need to make a man think with his head that is full with the ideas and the beliefs that you managed to put there. You need to make sure the man uses that thing, that brain of his, not the heart, not the spirit. And with those ideas and beliefs, you need to make the man know that the man's own instincts, the man's own nature is bad for him, and you know better. This is very important for good slaves to be yours. Now sometimes all the black magic in the world can't make this happen, no matter how clever your little programs are. You need a little bit more. You need to make the man weak, very weak, physically and mentally. Those two things are connected. Now how does one make man a weak? Well, you need to change man's biochemistry. Which things affect man's biochemistry? Well, one, man is the product of his environment. And now you have taken the man out of the nature, the very first step. Get that right if you want to have any chance of creating good slaves for your ass. And you have put the man into man-made and natural environment. Now do you want to create beautiful, awe-inspiring, creative looking environment for your slaves where they feel inspired, their creativity is blossoming like the flowers they never get to see? Exactly. There's not gonna be no flowers in that man-made unnatural environment. The buildings they're gonna be living, they ain't looking cool as hell. There is not gonna be no cathedrals, no cool ass castles, no temples, none of that shit. The buildings need to look like blocks. You need to stack them up. Create little cells for people. Remember, you don't want those slaves to be grounded. The environment needs to be very unnatural for this to work. Next up, what else is there in the environment man has? Well, obviously, the man needs a woman. They complement each other. They bring the balance to the life of a man. You need to make this relationship very bad, horrific even, damaging for the man and for the woman. The more damage, the better slave you're gonna get. So you really need to start to think again for some programming ideas. You need to make the women go against the man and the man go against the women. This is very important. The man has to go against his masculine nature and the female has to go against his feminine nature. This is a good first step. Now the man wants the women to create a family. Nature is all about creating families, continuing your bloodline. Now, you don't really want that shit too much. One child at max. One good slave child at max. Okay, 2 at max. You can have more slaves at 2. But 3? Hell no. That's too many slaves for your ass. You can't handle them. They might rebel. So make sure the man and the women are damaged both. They don't really like each other, but they still gonna have this natural urge to be together. It's very hard to completely remove that, and you need that little bit to get those little mini slaves coming up to continue your slave bloodline, because you want to have those slaves for centuries. So just keep the relationships between the man and the women alive, that much that you can have 1, max 2 little slaves, and then start the education, the programming, sprinkle some black magic in that mix for those little slaves very early on. Very important. And those slaves, they never been in the nature anymore. They are already born into your and natural man-made system. Shit, those slaves are gonna be great. So make sure the relationships between the man and the woman are kinda fucked up until you can figure out some way to make the reproduction process that you don't even need man and woman anymore. That's the perfect situation, really. But that's a little bit more in the future again, so you still need a little bit relationship, but make it fucked up. Remember that. Fuck that shit up real good for the man and the women. Now let's go back a little bit for the biochemistry, like I said. The programming, the black magic sparkles, they ain't enough. For the most cases, you can get some of the weaker ones already with that, but you really need to make everybody weak. And just the unnatural environment, fucked up relationships, that ain't enough. This one really starts to bring things together for you, because this also affects the relationships. How you really affect man's biochemistry, state of being, is food, is water, is the air the man breathes. You need to make this shit toxic as hell. The man is what he eats, what he drinks, what he breathes. Now the food cannot be like the food in the nature. The food in the nature make man feel good. Make those good ass chemicals. Makes man biochemistry work perfect. Testosterone gonna be real high. You don't wanna know that shit. Those guys gonna rebel on your ass. So testosterone needs to go low. So you need to make the food the man eats very unnatural, very man-made. Get some ideas from the nature, but start changing those foods. Pollute those foods with toxicity. Now more the better, really, to a certain degree though, because you don't want the mans to die off. You need just the right amount of toxicity in the food, in the water, in the air, to make the man's biochemistry kinda messed up, kinda dysfunctional. But you don't want to make them so weak that they die off quickly. You want them to be in this state of suffering and pain, of course. That's the state of being a slave, of course. But it's manageable for the slave for at least for 40, 50, 60 years. Now human beings probably could live over 100 easy in the nature. But you really want maybe 40 years of good work out of them, 50 at max. And after that, then those diseases that been brewing along for all those years of very unnatural life of a slave, and those diseases take them over. So think about the toxicity and think about the threshold that you can put. Like not too much, but not too little either. That's really bad. That's where the problems can arise for your ass, the rebellions and shit. And really look at the foods that just give enough sustenance to the man that he can do your work for you. Just bring enough nutrients to your slave, but not too many. Not too little also, but especially not too many. So this is very important step in the process of making slaves. The unnatural food, water and air. Throw that toxicity in there, make it very unnatural, very man-made, and make the natural foods impossible for your slaves to get, and don't even show any of it for them, because they might get those natural urges for them. Their instincts might kick in. You don't want that, so let them forget about the natural food, natural way of living, all that. Never show that stuff to them. Never. One of the key rules here, key points, never show that stuff. Now that we got man's biochemistry, that environment on lock to create perfect slaves, sometimes even that ain't enough, because that freaking human spirit, that's strong. For some it's very strong, it's very hard to program some of those people, and you want them all for you. So you're gonna stack up. You're gonna be thinking like stack of unnatural things to throw up on these natural humans. So you stack the favor on your side. So next up you need to create these reflections, these mirrors, these screens that the slaves can look themselves all the freaking time. They need to see themselves every single day, so they get obsessed with themselves. Good or bad, doesn't really matter, but the important thing is they're obsessed with themselves. Now with these screens and mirrors that you have created, you need some technology so the slaves can broadcast their own faces, their bodies to other slaves, so the slaves can look at other people also all the time, compare themselves with other people all the time, then compare it to themselves because they have their own mirrors. So this really creates that self-love or self-hate, self-loathing with themselves. This starts to create that envy, jealousy, comparisons, who's better, who's worse. And the key point here is you, as a master, you never show yourself to these slaves. They never know about you. No. They only know about the other slaves, and they know about themselves real good. All the little malformities, the ugliness or beautiness, whatever. All the little things in their skin, their eyes, their hair. You need to make them obsessed with themselves and the other slaves. All the slaves can think about is themselves and the other slaves. They never think about you. Ooh, you are completely out of this picture, in the darkness, controlling your slaves. Perfect situation, perfect programming, perfect way of making slaves for you again. Ooh. Now with those screens you have created, you're gonna put the best looking slaves, because some of them, they're gonna still look pretty good. So you're gonna put those to the screens the most, and you're gonna really program those slaves, the best looking ones, and they're gonna that programming to the other slaves because they look the best. The shittier looking slaves, they look up on those good looking slaves because they want to be like those slaves, and what they are saying must be true, must be the answer, even though you're hiding the real answer over here where you took the man from. But shh. But anyway, the best looking slaves over here on the screens, they should be there all the time. That's their slave job. So the shittier slaves gonna do the shittier jobs. So those slaves, the best slaves, they're gonna help you program or brainwash the shittier slaves. And they need to be doing this 24/7. And maybe give a little bit better food for those. A little bit better water, air, all that jazz. So they still be looking like prettier. That's really good way to use these screens with multiple different ways. So now we start to have strong, very strong AF base over here for some good slaves. We start to have very good and natural man-made environment for the slaves to be at. Now we're gonna start to think about how do we lure these mans in the nature doing their manly shit, fucking being on the sun all the time, grounded. How do we lure these men, these women out of there to your paradise? Now, great way of making the men come to you is to use natural resources. But you need to be really clever with this one, because in the nature, one man has a lot of fishy fish. The other man has a lot of apples. So one man wants some apples, but he don't have apple tree, but he got that fishy fish. The other man, he don't got no boat, but his place got those apple trees. So the one man can trade bunch of apples for couple fishy fish. That's how man do things in the nature with other men in his community. But you come along and you create from something kinda worthless. Just pick something that's there's a lot of it in the nature, is easy to get, really worthless, has no meaning for man, no real purpose. But make it shiny, make it real shiny and good looking. And then you start to say to the natural man, this shiny thing is worth this much of fishy fish and this much of apples. And you start to trade the shiny thing for natural resources. This is the key to start tricking the man to give up his resources for this piece of shiny worthless thing. So you start to get the resources, and the man starts to depend on the shiny thing. And then you start to promise that the shiny thing the man now little bit has, if he gets more of the shiny thing that you created over here, you got all of it. But if the man can get some more shiny thing, he can have apples of his own. He can even have a freaking cow, maybe even sheep, maybe even a little bit nicer shelter. Maybe even in the future, man can buy beaches with the shiny thing. But you never tell a man that you create the shiny things over here. You have the monopoly of the shiny things already made. So the man gets addicted to the shiny things and starts to forget the nature. You start to promise the moon and the stars. You can even buy the moon from the sky. Maybe even the sun. If the man works enough for you, he can buy the sun for himself with the enough of these shiny things. This is a tremendous way to corrupt the natural man's mind and start the journey towards the paradise. You know what I mean? So keep in mind that maybe at the beginning you need to give some resources for the man for the shiny things. But at the end of the day, because you have the monopoly of the shiny things, you get those resources and much more back. Patience. Patience, my lord. This is a long game. It's not gonna happen overnight. And when the man gets addicted enough to the shiny objects, you really start to bring all of that base, that man-made unnatural base we've been talking about, together. Now here's a couple more sweet tips for you, because I'm a sweet guy. The emotional state of a man in the nature is peace, calm, based state of being. There's no worries. The man lives in the moment. So you really need to start changing this quickly after the man becomes addicted to your shiny things. So you really want that fear state of mind. That's very good. That puts the man to fight or flight mode, and man really don't use logic or reasoning anymore. He don't have calm mind, his heart is racing, he cannot think for himself. And that's good, because you're gonna think for him now and for the rest of his life. This is what it's all about. The slaves, they don't think, they just do. They just be for you. You do the thinking now. So you gotta introduce a lot of fear. Again, the screens you created, you can use also just rumors or any of that shit. Just start making shit up, like there's some dragons over there, or some things are gonna come out of the sky that is gonna hurt you. There's some deadly things in the food the man has been eating in the nature all these years. So you got this better food for the man that don't have the deadly things that the man cannot even see, but you know better. You do the thinking now. So just start making bunch of shit up from every which way possible. The more the better, really. The slaves' brains cannot keep up with this information. Just bombard them with all this great shit you've been coming up. Go into your creative bag with this shit, and you can come up with like everything. It can come from the sky, from the water, from the food, from the air, whatever. Just make shit up. The slave's gonna believe you. Now we really start to be cooking with gas over here. Like if you can implement even a couple of these things, but the more the better again. And when you start to implement all of these things slowly but surely, bring them into reality for these slaves. And when these things are implemented, these slaves gonna be your slaves all of your life, all of your children's life, and your bloodline's gonna be the masters of this reality for a very long time. These slaves ain't gonna know what hit them, bro. And when they finally start to forget about the nature, they don't even remember what it's about. That's really the ultimate point you wanna get into. Like they don't have any memories of the nature anymore. They don't even recognize their own natural instincts anymore. Like when they come up, they just think with this thing. Like it don't make any sense, this instinct, this urge that comes up. It don't make any sense in this slave world I live in. It has no meaning in this slave world for me as a slave, so I don't need this must be wrong, all of that jazz, and you're gonna be just sitting back, enjoying life, and